I awoke that night to Echo, my dog, barking up a storm. He was perched on the edge of my bed, facing the door and yapping away like crazy. I scratched him behind the ear to get him to calm down and guided him to his usual spot on my bed. In hindsight, him barking was the first warning. My brain, overactive as it was curious as to why he was behaving so oddly. Echo rarely barked at anything, so it was unlikely he was barking at nothing. Perhaps there's a skunk in the yard, I thought to myself. Seeing as how I was half asleep at the time, the explanation seemed perfectly logical. Had I been more aware, I would have realized that any skunks in the neighborhood would be weeks into their hibernation this time of year. Even if they weren't, the vicious snowstorm outside would deter them from wandering about. I attempted to fall asleep after that, and how I wish that I did. Unfortunately, due to my habit of sleeping with my mouth open, I was becoming increasingly aware of how thirsty I was. I tried to stay in the warmth of my bed for as long as possible, but it wasn't long before my tongue felt like sandpaper. It was clear to me that I wouldn't be able to sleep without a glass of water. I told Echo to stay and slept in my moccasins. The air outside my nest of blankets was freezing, so I put on my housecoat as well. When I left my bedroom, I noticed that the basement television was showing static. Mother probably forgot to turn it off after watching her murder mysteries, I thought. The TV's playing static because of the storm outside. It's just messing with our cable. Another logical explanation, which would be far less logical if I were fully awake. My mother, no matter how tired she was, would never leave the television on. She's far too meticulous to do something like that. In my sleepy brain, however, it made perfect sense. I couldn't find the TV remote, as the room was dark and I didn't want to accidentally blind myself by turning on the lights, so I left the TV on. I should have turned back, crawled back into bed, and waited for morning. I climbed the stairs to the landing, which was bathed in an orange glow, cast by the street lights reflecting off the clouds from above. From up here, I could hear the wind battering itself against the house's walls. I was starting to wake up a little bit. I noticed that the deadbolt on the door was unlocked. That was my final warning. My parents felt that it wasn't necessary, with the storm and all. The seeds of doubt began to form in my mind. I knew that that wasn't the case. Some new neighbors have been suspected of breaking into people's houses and stealing their liquor. My parents, being collectors of fine wines, have made it a habit to lock the deadbolt every night for the past few months, even when the act was completely pointless. My conscious brain was starting to wake up, starting to notice these things. A feeling of uneasiness began to pool in my gut. Still, after locking the deadbolt, I continued to the kitchen. From the kitchen, I had a clear view of the living room, and while I filled an empty glass of water from the sink, I not only noticed that the television up here was also showing static, but that there was a figure seated on the couch. Don't worry, I thought nervously. That's just Dad. He's been sleepwalking again. This time, I was fully aware of the flaws in this logical explanation. The fact that the figure on the couch was bald and plump, while my father is lean and his hair is only beginning to thin. The fact that my father has been taking medications to prevent his sleepwalking. The fact that I could hear him snoring from my parents' bedroom. I tried to disregard these thoughts, to push them to the back of my mind like I had done before. This time it didn't work. I gently set my glass on the kitchen counter. My hands were cold and clammy, shaking in terror. My heart rate was increasing and my breathing was rapid, even in confusion of the moment. I knew that this wasn't just some regular burglar. I doubted that the thing on the couch was even human. I reached for the phone to call 911, only to find out that I couldn't get any service due to the storm. Frustrated and confused, I started randomly pushing buttons on the keypad. That's when I heard the thing move. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my blood run cold and send clammy sweat down my back. It was the sound of bones popping. Not just a few either. It sounded like an entire room, full of people cracking their necks, backs, and knuckles all at once. I turned from the useless phone to look at the creature for the first time. It was now standing, facing me, and illuminated by the orange glow from the living room's window. It stood about 6 feet tall, was completely naked, and was rather plump. Its skin was a sallow, grayish color and looked almost slimy. The creature's arms dangled as if they were boneless, and at the end of each was a gnarled mess of fingers. The worst part about the creature, however, was its face. The thing had no nose, only 2 slits where its nostrils would be. Its eyes were hollow, white orbs that seemed too large for the rest of its face. For its mouth, as well, I didn't really have one. It looked as if its entire lower jaw had been knocked clean off the rest of its face, leaving a swollen pink tongue hanging in its neck. The creature started walking towards me, making that awful sound with each step. It looked like it was trying to speak to me, but without its jaw, the tongue could only wriggle around helplessly and sinister moans escaped its throat. I did what anybody else would do in that situation. I ran like hell. When I got to the landing, I closed the door between the landing and the first floor. I had 3 options. I could surrender myself to the creature, I could run downstairs, which would eventually lead to a dead end, or I could run outside and face one of the worst blizzards of the decade. None of my choices were desirable, but I knew that I'd be dead anyway if I kept standing there. I didn't get much time to choose, though, as the door between me and the creature swung open, revealing the thing in all of its grotesque glory. It began to descend the stairs toward me. I made my decision, and as stupid as it was, I wouldn't be alive if I hadn't done it. I unlocked the deadbolt and ran outside. For the first few seconds, I felt absolutely nothing, save for the adrenaline and fear surging through me. Looking back at the house as I ran, I swear I could see the creature looking at me through the kitchen window. It almost looked happy. By the time my house faded into the blizzard, the cold was starting to set in. Wearing only pajamas, slippers, and a housecoat, it wasn't hard to see why. I continued running, in fear that the thing would chase me, but I was starting to go numb. By the time I reached the highway, I couldn't feel my fingers. By the time I noticed the approaching headlights, I couldn't feel my toes. By the time the vehicle had stopped in front of me, everything was starting to go black. I awoke several hours to the sound of a machine beeping. At first, I thought the whole thing was a nightmare, that I was back in my bed, and that my alarm clock was telling me to wake up and go to school. I began to regain consciousness and realized that I was no longer wearing my pajamas. Rather, I was wearing a hospital gown. There was a nurse standing above me, checking my vitals. Apparently, a tow truck driver had found me on his way to his job. He did what anyone else would do if they found a teenager running like hell in the middle of a snowstorm at midnight and rushed me to a nearby hospital. I was admitted to the ER with severe frostbite and a moderate case of hypothermia. My parents were contacted immediately, and at first, it seemed like I was going to go back home again. That is, until the doctors asked me why I was outside in my pajamas in the first place. I told them the story, as I couldn't think of any excuse that sounded less crazy. As one might expect, I was shipped off to the psych ward. That is where I'm typing this now. See, the doctors can come up with any number of logical explanations. They can tell me that I was hallucinating, that I was having a nightmare, that I was overstressed. With a medical degree, no one can explain any unnatural phenomenon with enough pills and prescriptions. But just because an explanation is logical, doesn't mean that it's true. At first I believed what they were saying. At first it all made sense. But something that happened later in the day changed that. I was reading a book on my bed, starting to come to terms with what happened, when the TV in my room flickered to life. It was showing static. Outside the window, I could see a gray figure outside the hospital. Even though I was on the 4th floor, I could tell that it was looking directly at me. Okay, so this story is interesting, to say the least, in that it is a genuine 100% shit pasta, or crap pasta, or whatever you want to call it. Honestly, this creepypasta feels a lot worse than Kosciuszko, Texas, the one that I read a while ago. Oh my god, I cannot believe how badly this creepypasta has been butchered. And it has such a unique idea, like, when you get down to thinking about it. So, of course, this is, like, this creepypasta is called Logical Explanations. And it, of course, talks about, you know, every, like, minor little things that we see when we're halfway asleep, and we just write them off as normal, you know. It takes that very scary, interesting concept that something so subtle can be changed in your house and you won't really know it because you'll have some explanation for it when it's actually all wrong. It takes that scary premise and it completely runs it into the fucking ground. And it does this in 3 different ways. One is it kind of demands that we just shut up and listen. It doesn't, like, allow us to use our own subtle, like, intellect to determine what's going on. One of the best creepypastas I've ever had, that I've ever been able to read, has been one where a young man is going to work, and he sees a man sitting on, like, he sees a man sitting in the subway who's just, like, saying different animal names, and he says human to this one guy, and I'm not going to spoil the ending, but you have to think a little bit on it. It doesn't, like, just straight up go out and give you what's scary about it. It doesn't go out and show you immediately. It uses the perfect, like, it doesn't, like, tell you. It uses show, don't tell technique. And honestly, this creepypasta could have used it. It could have used show, don't tell, and I feel it would have been a lot scarier, rather than, oh, the dog's barking because there's probably a skunk. But there were no skunks around this time, so something was wrong. To me, that's lazy writing. And it gets worse, if you ask me, because mainly due to the fact that when he's put in the hospital, he's just kind of instantly checked into the mental ward because he saw something that was unnatural. And by the way, that monster, you really should have, like, if you ask me, I feel like it would have been much smarter to use a actual person, like a psycho or something, that broke into your house while you weren't aware of it. I feel like that would have been much stronger, rather than just having some weird, creepy Alamau that you pulled out of your ass and had him to be this, like, super scary entity. And, you know, that honestly would have been a lot less insulting, if you ask me. Well, not really insulting, but it would have been better. I personally would have also liked that ending to be completely rewritten. The fact that he's thrown into a psych ward simply because he saw a weird hallucination. If that were the case, I would have been put in a psych ward so many years ago, I would probably not even be here today. So, you know, the ending was really bad, and it felt really lazy and really rushed. It's almost like the, I don't know what I'm typing anymore, so I'm going to quickly come up with it. And other than that, this is a genuine shitpasta. Nothing else to say about it. I would definitely like to see a lot of revisions done. Specifically, having more of a show why everything is scary, why everything that's so subtle, why you're able to explain it away. Don't tell us what's wrong about it. Have us actually, like, witness it. Have the character, like, walk down, or have the dog be barking, and he doesn't realize that there are no skunks around. He doesn't even think of that. He goes downstairs and sees the deadbolts unlocked, and he's kind of like, well, that's unusual. My parents don't do that. And then he sees the TV on in the living room, and then he goes, wait, that's not supposed to be on. That my mother or my dad would never leave it on. My dad wouldn't be watching TV at this hour. That would be appropriate. As he slowly witnesses it, it slowly clicks. He understands, hey, something's bad is about to happen. And I would completely omit the psych ward ending. That would really, really strengthen this creepypasta, and it would actually make it somewhat terrifying to read. You know, it would actually make it kind of terrifying to read. But anyway, that's my opinion on this story. It has potential, but right now, it's so awful. And it honestly, right now, deserves a spot on the Crappypasta website, which is where I'm reading this from. Yeah, anyway, that was Logical Explanations. I hope you enjoyed a read-through of this Crappypasta, shitpasta, whatever you want to call it. And I really, really want to know, do y'all want me to find that creepypasta I was talking about just a minute ago, the one about the man who sees the old man in the subway? You want me to, like, find that and read it? Because I will, because I love that creepypasta. It's so subtle, but when you get it, and it's good. So anyway, I'll get another video out for you guys this week. That about wraps up this video. I mean, just saying that. I'll go ahead and get another video out for you guys probably Friday or Saturday. If not, then definitely next week. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, please do help me out by liking, subscribing, you know, just do whatever you really think you have to. I'm the Militant Horse, and I'll see you fellows Later. Bye-bye.